I didn't understand it. And I try to be an understanding kind of person. And I try to put myself, I'm a very empathetic person. And I kept trying to understand and give him grace. Um, but it was never returned. And I never understood any of it. He kept working late. I would go to my girlfriend who lives 8 houses down and ask her and go have a cocktail with her in the evening. And she would ask, "Where's Jeffrey?" And I said, "Well, he's working late." And she would say, "No, he's not. He's with her." And I mean, everybody knew her. She was supposedly our daughter and granddaughter. And it was just, I don't know how to say it without cussing. It was a mind fuck. I mean, it was just, I felt like my bowels were being pulled out of me. I thought I was going crazy, truly. Um, because I loved him so dearly and I believed in who he was as this born again Christian and hero. And it just was not computing. And truly, a lot of tears, a lot of, I felt so abandoned, so betrayed. I was contacted by a couple of girls. At the time, I didn't know that they were a couple of girls. They had created a fake Facebook account to let me know what he was doing. He was going to Catherine's place of work 2 or 3 times a week, bring her lunch. They would sit in the car, in the truck. And I knew his favorite behavior, sexual behavior, was blowjobs, and her head would disappear in the parking lot, in the truck. So I knew what she was doing, and these girls told me about it. They had actually looked at his Facebook post and saw that he, was going out to California and to take his wife to for treatments for breast cancer, and they were outraged for me, and so they contacted me and told me about because she was telling everybody at work he was her boyfriend and that they had been dating a couple of years, and but he was so much older than her. He's way easily old enough to be her father, and that's what made them suspicious. And they contacted me, and I started tracking him. I put a tracker on his truck.
I'm Donna Anderson, and this is True Love Fraud Stories. Sometimes in a marriage, people grow apart. Love fades and the union ends. It hurts, but we get it. What's really painful is to realize that your spouse's professions of love were never true, and the entire marriage was never real. That's what happened to the woman in the story I'm about to tell you. We'll call her Patricia. All names are changed. Patricia had been married twice, first to her high school sweetheart, and then to a man she met in college. The second marriage lasted 23 years. She and her husband had a son together and invested heavily in real estate. The last few years, as the union was ending, were brutal. The divorce was extremely stressful, but Patricia got through it and was ready to try again. This time, she knew exactly what she was looking for in a man.
A born again Christian, because I'd already done the unequally yoked stuff, and somebody that was patriotic and had integrity and loved me like a Christian husband should. And because I didn't have that.
Patricia lived in a small southern town where there weren't many single men, or at least none that she was interested in. So she joined Match.com. A few months after signing up, she was away visiting her family when a new match, Jeffrey, reached out to her on the dating app. They corresponded a bit. To Patricia, he was interesting, but geographically undesirable.
I had about 7 dates lined up for when I came back in a couple of weeks, and he kept wanting to talk to me. And I kept telling him, you live too far away. He lived south of the city. And um, I told him I was looking for a husband, not a date. I could find a date. Obviously, I had 7 lined up for when I got back. And he kept pushing. And it was an interesting situation. A girlfriend of mine who I was talking to, she started crying and she said, there's somebody that you're not going out with that God wants you to go out with. And Jeffrey was the only one. And so I finally gave him my phone number and we started talking for hours, hours on end. He was everything I wanted. I had fallen in love with him over the phone, had never met him. Um, I know, no, he was finding out what I wanted and was becoming what I wanted.
For 10 days, while Patricia was still out of town, they spoke on the phone and texted. Jeffrey said he wanted to be her first date when she returned.
And this is how he manipulated me because I had these dates lined up and he was like, well, I've already told goodbye to the 3 women I was talking to besides you, because if you're not the one, then you're better than all of them. So if you're not the one, then they're not going to be. I'll have to start all over. And that made sense to me because I really liked him. I thought I was in love with him even at that point. And I figured, well, I didn't have that kind of connection with the other guys that I had been talking to. And so I canceled all my dates. And he was my first date and last date.
When Patricia returned home, they went on their first date. How was it?
Oh, it was awesome. It was amazing. Went to Longhorns and had dinner and kissed at the table. And he had sent me this photo while we were texting back and forth of this couple laying in the back of a pickup truck, holding hands and kind of cuddling and looking up at the moon and the stars and everything. And he had rented a pickup truck and gotten a blow-up bed and went out to the lake, and he had pillows and blankets and all the stuff. And after dinner, and we went out there and talked for hours. Made out a little bit, but really just sharing our hearts. Or, as I know now, I was sharing my heart and giving him more information as to how to con me.
Early on, Patricia didn't realize Jeffrey's nefarious plan. She was simply enthralled with her new suitor. There was so much about him that she liked.
His smile, his military history. He was a force recon sniper and spent 11 months under the sun overseas fighting a war. He had 25 confirmed kills. I have no idea how many unconfirmed kills because he was a sniper. And I had asked him, do you have problems sleeping at night because you've killed these people? And he said, no, they were bad people. And I'm very patriotic and admire somebody putting their life on the line. And he had the tattoos to prove it, the force recon tattoo and the sniper tattoo. And he was a homicide detective, and I admired that. He was a protector of everyone, and I admired his faith. I loved the fact that he loved God and as much as I did, and I admired the fact he was looking for a wife, and he had given his ex-wife everything so his children wouldn't have to lose their home, and he continued to pay for her car insurance, and that protectiveness continued with his kids. I have since found that a lot of that was lies. In fact, all of that was lies, but I admired that. His smile, the way he kissed, the twinkle in his eye, it was just everything.
Early in their relationship, Jeffrey presented himself as a gentleman who liked to hold hands and cuddle.
Like one time we were driving through the city, and I'm a bit of a speed demon in the car, and he was just driving around like an old man. And I said, you could get in the left lane and go around. And he's like, I don't need how fast we get there is not important. You're sitting next, the most important person is sitting next to me holding my hand. And I'm in no hurry to get out of this position. And I'm like, oh, how sweet.
2 weeks after they started dating, Jeffrey proposed. Soon after that, Jeffrey introduced Patricia to his family. Patricia wanted to help her new fiancé patch up his relationships with his children and sisters, who believed what Jeffrey's ex-wife had said about him.
She had accused him of cheating on her with 4 women. And I'm like, how could you believe that? He's a hero. He's a force recon. He's a sniper. He's a homicide detective. He's a born-again Christian. How could you believe that of him?
3 months later, on New Year's Eve, 2015, Patricia and Jeffrey married in a lovely, simple ceremony. Jeffrey moved into Patricia's home, and the beginning of their married life was wonderful. But difficulties soon arose when Jeffrey developed a serious medical problem.
So he had a back surgery, and 2 weeks later, in the middle of the night, he was dying. He had been infected. Found out later he had been infected with 3 different bacteria. So I rushed him to the hospital after he kept saying he would wake up with the shakes and in the middle of the night. And he says, oh, I just have, it's just allergies. Can you give me a Tylenol?
Patricia gave him the over-the-counter medication. It didn't help. Jeffrey didn't want to go to the hospital, but his wife insisted.
I got my son upstairs to help me get him in the car, and I rushed him to the hospital. And they said if I had waited another half an hour to an hour, he would have died.
Jeffrey spent weeks in the hospital. He had 2 surgeries to clear out the infections. Then Patricia nursed him for 6 months at home. The infection paralyzed his shoulder, so he could no longer lift his right arm or hold a gun.
So he was medically retired from the police force, and then he just kind of languished around.
About this time, mortgage rates were low. Jeffrey convinced Patricia to refinance her home, which she had built 10 years before meeting him. He put his name on her house and included his son's car loan in the new mortgage. The following year, in 2017, Patricia faced her own medical crisis. She was diagnosed with breast cancer.
It was a total shock. I've never been sick, except for the occasional cold. I'd never really been sick. My Achilles heel is stress. And so the second divorce was very stressful. He and I had been married 23 years. I was very much in love with him, and it was a complete betrayal. And so I think the original diagnosis of breast cancer in 17 came from that relationship. And I handled it naturally. I healed it through supplements and diet and coffee enemas and black salve and prayer and exercise and sweet loving and all the rest of it. So I handled it naturally, and it went away.
Jeffrey was totally supportive while Patricia worked on her recovery.
While I was getting diagnosed with breast cancer and my mom was dying, he had told me, just take care of yourself. I want you to take care of yourself. I'll take care of the finances.
Patricia's income came from her properties. Before she married Jeffrey, she owned the home she lived in, 2 nearby rental homes, and several Airbnb properties in Tennessee, which she called cabins. Jeffrey took over the management of all the properties.
We'd buy a cabin, it would appreciate, he'd sell it, and he'd buy 2. You know what I mean? And so that's how we got up to 8 cabins on top of 2 houses here in Georgia and 8 cabins in Tennessee. Just kind of moved things around while I was not paying attention. put everything under a LLC, property management, a property investment property company, and with him and I as owners. So essentially, legally, I didn't know what I was doing, but essentially, legally, I was transferring half of my wealth to him.
If you're wondering if someone in your life is a narcissist, sociopath, or psychopath, and you need advice on escape and recovery, talk to Donna. Donna Anderson, author of LoveFraud.com and host of True Love Fraud Stories, offers personal consultations. Since she founded Love Fraud in 2005, Donna has collected more than 10,000 cases, so she's probably heard a story like yours before. You're certainly not alone. Donna is also a certified Reiki master. Reiki is a healing approach for stress reduction and relaxation. Donna combines this with her deep emotional release technique to help you let go of the pain of your experience. Book your session today at lovefraud.com/talk to Donna.
Patricia believed her husband loved her and had her best interests at heart, so she went along with the transactions.
Basically everything equity from the house that I owned to properties in Tennessee, cabins, short-term rentals. And he did that with everything. Everything I owned, he was either selling, financing to buy more and more cabins. And all while me trying to survive breast cancer, my mom dying, all the rest of it.
Patricia did what she could for her mother, who had dementia, and focused on her own recovery.
I Googled everything and went down all kinds of rabbit holes. I had never been sick before. And I had gotten my certification as a health coach, but that's how to stay healthy, how to be healthy, not how to kill cancer. I just know that God created us to be healthy as long as we give our bodies the food that it needs and requires. And that's not just the food that you eat, but the liquid you drink and the food that you put in your mind and all of that. Food is more than just what you ingest through your mouth.
As Patricia educated herself, she discovered a type of energy healing that was particularly helpful. She liked it so much that she became certified in it. Patricia offered free screenings to the people in her support group. One of her friends, a woman who suffered from stage 4 breast cancer, brought her granddaughter, Catherine, who was in her 20s, and her 8-year-old great-granddaughter, Laura. Each screening took a couple of hours. During that long day, Jeffrey kept the 8-year-old busy.
So Jeffrey took her on a walk to the lake and played checkers with her and watched cartoons with her while I was dealing with my girlfriend and Catherine, her granddaughter. And that was May. By December, Jeffrey said, "What was that little girl's name who had come by to get screened?" And I said, "Laura." And he said, "Well, I think God is telling me that I should be in her life." And my initial thought was, that's weird, but he's my born again Christian husband who's a Marine hero, sniper, force recon, homicide detective. Of course I trust him. He's the protector of everybody on the planet. But I thought it was a bit odd because she was 8 years old and he's 52 or whatever he was at the time. And then a couple of weeks later, he told me that he thought that God was telling him he should be part of Catherine's life. And I said, okay, that's good because it's creepy that you're an old man wanting to be friends with an 8-year-old. I said, but I know God. And if he's telling you to do this, then he's telling you that I need to be involved somehow too, because I'm your wife and it's not appropriate. And he says, well, I think we're supposed to be Catherine's parents and grandparents to Laura. And I'm like, okay.
In January, Patricia's friend, Catherine's grandmother, passed away. At the funeral, Patricia told Catherine about Jeffrey's belief that they should be like a family, and they all started spending time together. Catherine was still living with her grandfather. One afternoon, she invited Patricia and Jeffrey to visit them for lunch.
Laura had invited Jeffrey to her bedroom to show her toys and took him downstairs to show him her dance moves. And I saw him trail his hand across the back of Catherine's shoulders. And I thought, that looked too intimate. And she and I talked a lot, and we had developed a three-way text.
Catherine told Patricia that her grandfather had seen Jeffrey's behavior and wasn't happy about the older, married man visiting Laura's bedroom or running his hand over Catherine's shoulder. Then Patricia learned that Jeffrey and Catherine were texting directly. She asked her husband to please stop.
And he got all indignant, and it's always my fault. Things had started changing between us. Things were always my fault. Anything he did that I thought was questionable was my problem. So it was my fault that they were texting one-on-one because I took over the conversation in the three-way.
Patricia told Jeffrey he could jump into the text conversation whenever he wanted. It wasn't enough.
They kept telling me that they needed to talk one-on-one. And of course, I trust my husband, my born-again Christian military hero husband, implicitly. And so one evening, I left them on the back deck talking. Well, I went to bed, and I got up at 2 and looked out the window door to the back deck and saw it looked like they were asleep. So I went around to wake him up because it looked like it was positioned, it would hurt his neck, and they were talking still. So I went back to bed, and he came to bed at 6 and spooned up behind me and hugged me and told me thank you for letting them have that time to talk, even though his arm was around her when I looked out the window. And he said that God was smiling down on them, that they were connecting. And hearing it now, it sounds so twisted, but at the time I was so blind. I thought so highly that he was this superhuman man, such a honorable, deep integrity kind of guy, that it never would occur to me that he would be having starting an affair.
After all, Patricia was acting with integrity in the marriage. Through her work with the healing energy, she was in touch with a man named Robert, who lived in Louisiana. His wife had breast cancer. Patricia talked to Robert for over an hour while she was riding in a car. Jeffrey was with her. There was no betrayal. Not long after that, Patricia and Jeffrey took Catherine and Laura for a long weekend in one of their cabins. Patricia had just learned that her cancer had returned. She was emotional. The trip did not go well.
He created a situation where we had this huge blow-up fight. And it was based on my jealousy.
Catherine realized that her presence was hurting Patricia. She said she was going to pull away from the family unit that they had created.
And so I had talked her out of leaving. I just said, just stop having the one-on-one texts. And he basically started pouting the rest of the day. He wouldn't let me comfort him. And I had had enough of all this, the feelings in my gut was something was wrong here.
Patricia lost her cool and lambasted her husband. Catherine heard the fight.
Now that I know who he is, you look back and it's, well, obviously this was what he was doing, but she could hear the fight. And I was abusive because I had enough. I kept my mouth shut and had enough. And so now he could tell her that I was the abusive wife and he was staying with me because of my cancer. And what a great guy he is.
A month later, Jeffrey moved out of the marital home. In the meantime, Patricia heard that the wife of the man she spoke to from Louisiana Robert, had died. She called him in May and left a message of condolences.
And June, he called back to thank me for my condolences. And I now say, made the mistake of asking me how I was. And by that time, Jeffrey had moved out and my life was upside down, had just exploded. He had moved out. I couldn't understand why he was having a difficult time kissing me or hugging me, or I now know he had started this affair and he was um, discarding me, but still needed me because he still wanted the money. And um, I told him, well, I told Robert, well, the cancer's back and the husband's left. And so we started becoming modern day pen pals. And because who do you talk to when all of your friends are married at 10 o'clock at night and they're in bed with their husbands? And so you text a friend who you know is lonely too in Louisiana. So he and I started basically a pen pal friendship.
Jeffrey was gone for 4 months, although he stopped by the house from time to time. He had gotten a job working for a cabinet refinishing business, earning 6 figures, even though he was still collecting disability payments. Jeffrey claimed he was sleeping at the office. Patricia suspected that he was actually staying with Catherine. Then Patricia found another lump in her breast. Jeffrey took her for a biopsy, and because he was holding her purse and phone, saw a text from Robert. Suddenly, Jeffrey wanted to come home. Patricia asked if it was because somebody else might want her.
And he said, oh, no, I've been thinking about it, for so long. And I said, well, the jealousy that you're feeling right now is the jealousy I have been feeling for, almost a year now with Catherine. So now do you get it? And because Robert and I are just friends, and you keep telling me you and Catherine are just friends. And he said, yeah, I get it. I get it. Can I please come home? I love you. I want to be the husband and da da da. I said, sure, of course. I love you. You're my husband. So he came home. And that was 1st of October. By the 1st of December, I needed a mastectomy because it had grown because of all the stress, and he knew about all the stress. And now I think he was trying to kill me so he could keep everything.
After the mastectomy, Patricia needed radiation. She wanted a special kind of therapy available in California that made the radiation 15% more effective. Jeffrey agreed to drive her to California, but he was apparently still in the midst of his affair with Catherine. Patricia found this out when Catherine's coworkers told her about her husband's lunchtime visits to the workplace. Now, Patricia wanted to know exactly what her husband was doing.
I put the tracker on the truck so I could see where his truck was, so I would drive over with my girlfriend and took photos. And then the second time I went with 2 girlfriends and took photos. And he started damage control and told me he was, because her ex-husband had contacted her and she was afraid that he would want to have contact with, he's a dangerous man and he would want contact with his daughter and all of this. And again, I gave him grace and I tried to believe him. And I had contacted an attorney at this point, and then I kind of backed away from that because he convinced me he's very thorough and effective liar.
Jeffrey had more excuses. He said he loved Patricia, but he didn't understand what was going on inside of him. He appealed to Patricia's empathy.
I hurt for him. This is how twisted it gets. I hurt for him that he was so heartbroken that he couldn't figure out what was going on in his mind. All a lie, all manipulation. I see that now. But back then, I hurt for him. Even while he had started this affair, he had told me that about me wanting a divorce and finding somebody. And then later in 21, when I repeated that back to him and how much that hurt me, he says, I didn't say that. You said that.
But Jeffrey didn't really seem to have feelings for his wife anymore. For example, Patricia and Jeffrey planned a trip out of town to attend the funeral of one of her friends.
And I asked him right before we left, I asked him for a hug. And this was his typical response when I would have to ask my husband for a hug or a kiss. He would just kind of roll his eyes and heavy sigh and give me one. I'm like, you know what? I'm done. No, I'm going to go to the funeral alone. I don't need to ask my husband for a hug on a day like today.
By October of 2021, Patricia and Jeffrey were in marriage counseling. The counselor spoke to them individually and then together. Jeffrey later told his wife that the counselor was amazed he was still with her. He implied that all the problems in the marriage were Patricia's fault.
That's what he was telling me. But he's a pathological liar, making me feel bad. I'm like, I haven't done anything wrong. I've just tried to figure out why my husband doesn't want to hug me and kiss me or have anything to do with me except a blowjob, which, I mean, he couldn't even have sex with me with looking at me in the eyes. He had to turn me around. I mean, it was bad. And so 180 degrees different from what it was in the beginning. And looking back now, he needed to stay with me until November of 21. Because by October, I said, you need to look me in the eye, you need to hug me and kiss me, or we're done. We'll separate as friends and be done. And several days later, when he asked, he said, I guess I need to find someplace else to live. And I, quick prayer, thank you, Lord, because I couldn't make him leave, but I wanted him to decide to leave. And because at that point, I was near suicide, and he left. And November 2nd of 21, we closed on 4 more cabins. We sold a cabin, had so much profit, we were able to buy 4 more cabins. And I now know he needed to stay with me until we closed on those. And he raped me that night, got me drunk. And I had since found out that after that, I tried to end my life because I was just nuts. There was so much chaos and cacophony in my own head about who this person was. How could I get him so wrong? And I didn't even know all the lies at that point.
She was about to learn her husband's true history. In early 2022, Patricia felt God telling her to call Jeffrey's ex-wife and apologize.
And I did. And I apologized to her, and I said, I've been very unkind behind your back about you, and I'm so very sorry. And she said, I, of all people, know exactly what you're going through. And of course, I forgive you.
The woman told Patricia that while they were still married, Jeffrey had tried to convince her to move north where he had a job opportunity, but she refused.
And they were getting divorced. He says, well, I'm moving up there and I'm going to find me a woman with assets, which he did, me.
Finally, Patricia and Jeffrey's divorce was underway. Jeffrey had purchased the cabinet refinishing company where he worked and assured Patricia that she was listed as an owner. This turned out to be false. Through the discovery process, Patricia learned that Jeffrey had hired his girlfriend, Catherine, who was supposedly their adopted daughter, to work for the company. He also spent company money on a brand new Mercedes SUV for her. Apparently, his plan was to scam the company, and Catherine's plan was to scam Jeffrey. She had already targeted another man, the chiropractor that Patricia had introduced to her friend, Catherine's grandmother.
And she did the same thing, invited the chiropractor and his wife for lunch, and Laura invited him to her bedroom to show him her toys, took him down to the basement, showed him her dance moves. He had a moral compass. He knew that she was looking for a husband and a father, and he was already that. And so they pulled away from them. I unfortunately, my husband at the time did not have the same moral compass, and her targeting him was exactly what he wanted because he had already targeted her.
Catherine and Jeffrey were manipulating each other, while Jeffrey was manipulating Patricia. Patricia hired a forensic accountant. Her husband wasn't happy about that. He ended up having to close the cabinet refinishing company. Still, they had to divide their considerable assets, 3 homes and 8 cabins.
We met together in February 22 at a Mexican restaurant to discuss how to divide our assets, everything. And this is how good of a pathological liar he is. When you can alter the words, when you can just lie with words, that's one thing. But when you can change your bodily behavior, he held my hand and he started crying, literally crying, and said, I just want you to know I don't want this, the divorce. And then he kissed me in the parking lot. And I got home and there was an envelope with a Platinum American Express in Catherine's name and the cabinet company's name. And I knew at that point, I had known in my gut that she had moved in with him because he was living in a rental. She moved in with him a month after we had split. But here he is crying. And he was so believable. I knew in my brain that he was lying. But how does a normal human being start crying with a lie? That's not a normal human being. That's a sociopath, a psychopath. I don't know. But to alter their behavior, it just blew my mind.
After 3 years, they settled out of court. Jeffrey came into the marriage with nothing, but left with plenty.
$4 million worth of property. For 4 years of what I thought of as a good marriage, and then a year and a half to 2 of hell, and then 3 years of divorce. It's a good payday for him. And he's defrauding the government with disability. He's not putting his 6 figures on his IRS tax forms. So the IRS doesn't know that he's working and making all this money while he's getting $2,500 a month of our taxpayer money for disability, that he's not disabled.
Jeffrey's disability was a scam, as were the stories he told about his military service. Yes, he had been in the Marines. He was honorably discharged, but everything else was false.
Yeah, all the lies. He was in a helicopter crash in Okinawa, and he was the only one to survive and had to swim 3 miles back to shore. And he spent 11 months under the sun in Kuwait in the desert because he was the front of the front line. And I have since found out that he was never a force recon. He was never a sniper. He was never overseas for years. He was overseas for 5 months total, 2 or 3 in Okinawa for training. And then he was in Kuwait City Airport as an auto mechanic working on Jeeps. He never saw active combat. He was never a sniper. He'd never killed anybody.
What did Patricia think about Jeffrey's professions of faith?
More lies. He will learn one day when he passes away what that will get him. He never talked about going to church. He would say, okay, I'll go if you find a church. And he never would when a church was found. Of course, I didn't know any of that at the beginning. But there is no faith. The only faith he has is in himself.
How did Patricia feel when she learned the truth about the man she thought was a God-fearing, born-again Christian and a patriotic military hero?
Oh, well, it's such betrayal. It's like just one more layer of it was like peeling back an onion. Every layer led to another layer of lies, which led to another layer of lies and another layer of manipulation. Just little things like my granddaughter called me and wanted me to co-sign on a car for her. Well, I asked Jeffrey, what did he think about it? And he said, well, his daughter had called him and asked him to co-sign on a car for her, and he refused. So how could I co-sign for my granddaughter if he wasn't even going to co-sign for his daughter? But when I talked to his daughter, once she and I got back together, she was like, I never asked him to co-sign on a car for me. So those kind of little lies just to manipulate me to not do things that he didn't want me to do instead of just saying, I'd prefer you not to do that. It was gratuitous. There was no reason to lie about it. He could have very easily just said, please don't. And I wouldn't have. But it just one more betrayal. I find truth to be so important, have always been truthful where it's painful sometimes. I feel like a dumbass. I feel like an idiot for trusting him. I have come to the conclusion that he targeted me because I'm empathetic, because I believe in the good in people until I'm proven wrong. I'm stupid loyal. And I think he targeted me for those things, besides beyond the assets. And I like that part of me. I'm not going to change who I am just to protect myself. I'm going to love on the people around me until they prove to me they are not trustworthy. And I'll just protect my finances. But I like the fact that I love people regardless. And I like the fact that I'm still friends with my first ex-husband and my second ex-husband. Um, won't ever be friends with him because I never knew him. All I was in love with was a mask. It wasn't him. It was evil behind the mask that he never let me see until he was done getting out of me what he wanted to get out of me.
But now, Patricia says, life is beautiful. She and Robert continued to see each other and eventually married. Robert is the real deal.
Now I have remarried. My son and I are close again. Robert came with a full family, and he's very close to his kids. I watched him when we were dating. I studied him. I watched his relationships with his kids, his family, neighbors, strangers, having, because these were things that Jeffrey didn't have. My life has expanded so much with family now, where I was alone December of 21. One of the reasons I wanted to commit suicide was I had no one. And the chaos and trauma that I was going through, my sister pulled away because she was so upset watching me go through the trauma and the mental anguish that I was going and despair. It was affecting her physical well-being. So even my beloved sister pulled away and couldn't handle it. My oldest and dearest friend who lives down the street, she told me the same thing recently, that she had pulled away because it upset her so bad to see how upset I was. And I'm thinking in my head, that's when you rally around your sister or your friend and stick with them and support them, but they didn't. And life is just beautiful now. I am so grateful to my Lord and Savior for restoring my life and giving me a life that is so much more peaceful and content and safe. I never used the word safe in relationships before. It never occurred to me to look for safety with a man because I was always very strong. And I was beaten down to where I was unrecognizable. I didn't recognize myself. The panic and the chaos and the despair. And these words sound so dramatic, despair and anguish and felt like my guts were being ripped out. And yet it's true. But if I were listening to this, I would think, oh, that's crazy. Nobody could get that far down because of some adultering husband. But the way they gaslight and lie, and I've gotten a PhD in studying this behavior, how they love on you and then they pull away, and it's not synchronized. So you never know when they're going to be loving to you. So you're constantly trying to get that hugging and kissing and loving, because it's so wonderful when they do. And then when they pull away, it's heartbreaking. But all of that is so true. It is what happens.
I'm Donna Anderson, and this is True Love Fraud Stories. As he divorced his previous wife, Jeffrey said his goal was to find a woman with assets. Patricia had multiple investment properties, exactly what he was looking for. So he became what Patricia was looking for, a God-fearing, patriotic hero. But it was all an act. And once Jeffrey had what he wanted, $4 million in property, he had no use for Patricia. Jeffrey's behavior was unethical, but probably not illegal. In the next episode of True Love Fraud Stories, I'll interview an attorney who will explain how the law treats real estate ownership in marriage and divorce. Be sure to listen. So, what do you think you've learned from this experience?
I've learned to be more guarded. I do my best, but I have become somewhat insular with friends and more guarded, and don't always take everybody at their word. I trust actions now more than words, because I have found out that if that was the problem with him, eventually the actions did not match the words, and that was where my brain just wanted to explode, and my guts, how could somebody do that to somebody who's gone through hell with the last husband, the last 2 or 3 years of that marriage? How can somebody do even worse after finding out what I went through with the other one? What kind of evil person would use that for ways to manipulate me later? Who would do these things to somebody whose mother is dying and died, whose father was dying and died, who had breast cancer 2 different times? What kind of evil piece of shit would do that? And I never thought that these kind of people actually existed except in movies. But they absolutely do. I cannot tell you. It's like they're having babies. It's like they're reproducing. There are more and more people that I see, that I hear about from other people, that have gone through the same thing. Sometimes it's just not the words that you can say to express how heartbreaking people like this are. Even now, here I am crying, and it's been 3 years.
True Love Fraud Stories is produced by lovefraud.com. For more information about this story, other great stories, or if you'd like to share your story, visit podcasts.lovefraud.com. Engineering is by Terry Kelly. To learn how to recognize and recover from everyday sociopaths, visit lovefraud.com. You'll find articles, books, and webinars. You can also make an appointment with me, Donna Anderson, for advice on dealing with and recovering from a disordered individual. Book your session today at lovefraud.com/talk to Donna. Also, I invite you to my Love Fraud Live YouTube show. I talk about how to spot, escape, and recover from sociopaths, and then I answer your questions. It streams live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I look forward to seeing you there.